It will start.
We're here to build your dream team. Building futures, that's our theme. Key Tech Talks will show the way. With Key Global, spread your wings.
Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome to another Key Tech Talk starring Lauren Halket of Key Global Recruitment. We talk about all things to do with neurodiversity within the IT tech world, because that is Lauren's particular focus. And today we have an incredible speaker just coming back from an AI conference in the States, Richard Scott of Procubate. But as traditional, I'm going to pass straight over to Lauren. There you go. Wonderful. And welcome both.
Thank you. Well, firstly, thank you, Richard, so much for coming onto our show. It's an absolute pleasure and a delight to have you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Your scenery, first of all, before I ask you any questions, looks very, very nice. So, presuming you're working from home there today, Scott. Sorry, Richard.
Well, I kind of am, but unfortunately, I'm actually working from somebody else's home. One of the things I started just before lockdown, and it's just absolutely boomed since, was a pet sitting agency for the very, very simple reason, completely random, almost nothing to do with anything I've ever done in my life before, except from a passion for animals. And it started because I kind of wanted the peace and quiet to be able to work to allow myself to really, really focus, because I've always been sort of very subject to the easy distractions with noise. I don't know about anybody else who's neurodiverse, but certainly when there's any background noise, when there's other things going on, it means that my focus gets shifted, and it can sometimes take me an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, or never to get back on track again. And so I actually went to help somebody out to look after their pets while they were away on holiday. For 3 weeks, I was in their home, really able to focus so much, and I did more in those 3 weeks than I'd normally do in 3 months. And it was just absolutely brilliant. And so as a result, they had an absolutely great time when they were away on holiday, because they knew that they left with somebody who was reliable, who knew pets really inside and out, because of working at the vets and various other things I've done in my life. And they just sort of came back and went, we've got to recommend you to everybody. And suddenly they were. And the next thing you know, I've got all these recommendations, 2 hands, 24 hours in a day. And I had to actually start to build more people, or find more people who could work for me, to get paid to use other people's homes as their office. And it's just grown and grown and grown. So I'm not actually at home, but I'm at one of my favorite clients' houses, and it's a really, really lovely house. Really hard life, swimming pool, sauna, hot tub. It's really hard. So please do feel sorry for me.
No way. That is absolutely incredible. Well done. That's such an awesome, story to neurodiversity and space and focus. As I can definitely say that, Richard, in the sense that my neurodiversity, through autism, ADHD, I am exactly the same. So space and sound is really, really important to me. And too much and too chaotic, if the setting isn't quite tranquil, then I can totally lose my focus for 1 hour, 2 hours, and like you said, even up to the next day. So it's I think space is really, really important, personally speaking, from being neurodiverse myself. I think it's becoming really, really important to managing neurodiversity within tech and the workspace. I think it really, really is.
Yes, absolutely. And it suits me down to the ground. Even though I've got an amazing lady in my life, I don't necessarily get the chance of spending as much time with her as I would want to. However, it means that when I am away, I can work hard and then go home and play hard.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's what it's all about. Work hard, play hard. We've got to do that.
Yes.
Yeah. So talk to me about your neurodiversity and, you know, your experience within the technology space, because I do believe, you know, that you've got quite a journey that you've been on, you know, within tech. So yeah, talk
Absolutely, absolutely. So I was brought up in a household with a father from Manchester and a mother from Prague, and I sort of like my parents weren't sort of very social, shall we say, with a lot of other people. They kept themselves pretty much to themselves, and it meant that as a child I didn't really come into contact with too many other children, and when I was in contact with other children, I actually found them extremely childish. I don't know whether this is an autistic thing or just a me thing, but I actually found a lot of them extremely childish, which sounds quite silly, really, to say, and just didn't really connect and resonate with them. And it meant that I didn't really engage with a lot of other kids. I didn't really sort of interact with a lot of other kids. And when I did actually start at school, I wasn't a happy bunny at all. I also had some really, really chronic illnesses in the form of some very, very strong allergies, which the doctor said for 21 years of my life, first 21 years of my life, it's a cold that'll pass. Yep, so I had a 21-year cold, which then turned out to be severely allergic to dogs, cats, horses, house dust mites, all of these other things, which is also crazy since I worked at a vet's for several years as well.
Yeah.
But that aside, I sort of like wasn't really the popular kid, let's put it that way. And by not being that popular kid, I basically sort of didn't really interact with other people. And I always felt like I was almost like an alien on the planet. And I didn't really sort of feel like I sort of fitted in. I'd meet some people and I'd really fit in with them. And it was like, oh my gosh, you speak the same language. But then I'd meet other people and I think you just don't speak the same language, even though we're using the same shared words. Somebody once described, well, not so long ago, described an autistic person and a non-autistic person having a conversation as being like a drunk person and a sober person having a conversation. I'm not saying which is which, but it certainly resonates quite a lot that some people you just really can connect with, you really get, you really understand, and other people you just really don't. So I'd always known that I was very different to most people, but some people I was just so on the same wavelength as. But it wasn't until a few years ago that I actually got diagnosed as being autistic. And then when you do start to go back and, okay, there's a certain element of confirmation bias where you look for patterns. But basically, I look back now and I kind of go, well, that was obvious, that was obvious, that was obvious, that was obvious. And it was a bit of a revelation in so many ways, but it did take me a little while to actually accept that that's what I was, if you like, because of the different connotations that are out there, which anybody that's autistic will actually sort of very much concur with, that there's just so many misaligned connotations because the sober or the drunk people, whichever way you want to say it, don't necessarily understand the others and think there's almost something wrong with them.
Yeah.
As opposed to them just being an alternative way of filtering information, of thinking, of sorting. And some things, you know.
Yeah.
But once you have digested,
oh gosh,
there we are. Once you have digested, then you can get it better than anyone else. And that's one of the great things about being autistic, if you like, that I've sort of come to sort of accept the label. And it very much is a label because it doesn't mean, you know, it's not like an on and off switch. But there are some really, really great advantages. But long before I actually was diagnosed, I actually was really interested in the autistic space for a whole different reason involving technology. But we can come back to that one later.
Yeah, because I was going to say that leads me on to my next question, Richard. And what a journey that is. I think just before I ask you this question, I think a lot of people, you must have felt so masked for so long, and then you got your diagnosis, and you could take that mask off. And
it's always the way. Don't worry, I'm going to edit some of this out. Don't worry.
Okay.
He'll come back in, I'm sure. It was a perfectly strong signal earlier. We had a 20-minute conversation before this.
Yeah. It's all right, Gareth. We'll edit this. part of it.
I had 2 people booked in for this week, and then literally yesterday evening, one and then the other sent me messages. They can't do it anymore, and so I was panicking and running around. But it is what it is, isn't it?
Are they going to come back on? Are they interested?
Yeah, they're coming back. I don't think they'd planned their life very well, and stuff happened.
Okay, fair enough.
Hang on, let me see. What is he coming back to me? Hang on, let me have a look.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can now. Dude, can you get your video back up?
Fantastic. I'm trying to do just that.
Do you want to move closer to your router?
Coming back. Well, it was actually, believe it or not, just going to switch that thing. It was actually because, if I can figure out how to change my camera, I do apologise. I feel like a real muppet here.
No,
it was because I was actually sitting in the conservatory and my laptop boiled in the sun.
Yes, I've had that before. That before. That's what tin foil's for, mate.
Yes.
I always put that on the outside of my laptop.
Yes, but when you try wrapping it around your head, around the laptop, that's where I'm doing wrong.
You're okay.
Hang on,
a little bit signal, isn't it? Yeah, it's not great.
Hang on, wait for it. It's gonna pick up in a minute. I know.
It will. It looks like it's doing a bit of a catch up.
Time flighting.
Yes.
Come on. Thankfully, I edit this within an inch of its life, so it should be all right.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, hopefully this feed is coming in that you can hear me and see me.
Yeah, we can, but it's not the sharpest, is it, Gareth? Yeah, that feels a little bit better now, Richard. Yeah, you've got it. Okay. You've got it.
Oh,
okay.
Finally.
What do you want to do, Richard? Do you want to? Sorry, Gareth. Do you want to start again?
No, I can cut it all in. I just want to cut myself out the image, and then do you want to ask the last question again? Do you want to ask the last question again? And I'll just cut. I'll disappear off. You ask the last question. It feels like it's back again, Richard.
I think that Lauren was about to sort of like ask a new question, even though I didn't fully answer the whole last question, which actually asked about the technology piece.
Yeah, I think what I was going to say is, yeah, it's all right. We'll cut it back in now.
Yeah.
We'll cut it back in. Yeah, so thank you, Richard, for explaining, more about your journey. Obviously you must have masked, you must have masked it for such a long time. And then, when you took it off, because it was the same with myself, I got my diagnosis about 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
So, I was just in kind of cuckoo land, really, totally misunderstood. A little bit like you said before, I found myself in situations where, you've got a drunk and you've got a sober person, and some of it just doesn't, there's just that connection lost, not that appreciation, I think, of the neurodiversity, because people look at you like, oh, what was that? So that bit is, for me, where it becomes uncomfortable, you feel misunderstood. So then obviously you take it, quite personal, because rejection is quite difficult as well. But I think once you get your diagnosis, I think everything, I think shoulders start to relax a little bit. I know it did for me. And okay, so you start to, kind of cross the I's and dot the T's a little bit, because everything starts to fall in place. It's like a puzzle. The puzzle comes together, sort of thing, and you think, oh, okay, well, that's why that happened, and that's why that happened. So you can, I think it gives you the opportunity then to work out, kind of invest in yourself a little bit more and work on yourself to get a bit better and find coping mechanisms and, and things like that.
I think that a diagnosis sort of can have different effects on different people, because I've spent my entire life masking and trying to get into the heads of others. My parents had a computing business when I was about 7 years old, and I could get on better with a computer than I could do with a human. It was, quite silly,
Yeah.
really, when you sort of like look at it that
Yes,
way.
I was
Because
the
it
same.
was very, very predictable. You knew exactly where you were. You put this in, you got that out. It was very, very clear. I've always had a passion for animals, so then I worked at the vets. Then I wanted to really understand other people, so I actually went to study psychology. So I went to do a degree in psychology. Didn't really like the way that was in terms of their teaching style, because their teaching style was memorize this. Don't think for yourself. You're not allowed to think for yourself. Just memorize this. And I'd come back and I'd go, well, actually, this psychiatrist sort of said that a child's mind is a blooming, buzzing confusion. This one says it's a blank slate. Maybe it starts off blank, then it becomes blooming and buzzing by all this. Oh, how dare you theorize? You're nothing but first year scum. I think those are pretty much the exact words that I actually heard. So I decided that studying psychology wasn't for me. And I basically then went into the wider world. And because of my technology background, I went to work to do some admin at an organization. And then I ended up managing their servers and doing all of their admin on their servers, on their computer servers. And, in the old world of Novell networks, as it used to, well, as it was called before they went belly up.
Yeah.
And I basically learned all about Novell networks. I sort of like basically they was told, oh, you understand about that. You must know about this technology, this technology, this technology. And back in those days, you were expected to be an expert in absolutely everything. And it just kind of kept on going. But I was all the time trying to get my head around how other people were thinking. And so I've always had that sort of chameleon kind of characteristic that I've always thought, well, what does the other person want from me? And how can I try to give them that? And one of the things about a lot of neurodiverse people is that we've tried to adapt so much in order to give other people what they need, because then it's only one person adapting and 100 people not adapting, or 80 people not adapting in a room kind of thing. So you're all the time trying to adapt to their world rather than just expect that they adapt to yours. And so when I got my diagnosis, for me, it was that explains things, not that excuses things. And I still try to adapt to other people's worlds because I think it's more respectful to try to adapt to the masses. However, I don't have a problem, if you like, in thinking what's wrong with me. That I always kind of thought, well, what's wrong with me that I have to actually adapt? Now I go, well, that is me. And my adaptation is just me acting as a great translator between the two worlds. And so most people wouldn't actually even know that I was autistic unless I actually tell them. Other people will kind of go, I can see that a mile off. Yeah. But that's just gave me that ability to act as this translator. So for me, it was a freeing feeling in the way that I knew that I could accept myself, but it didn't change myself. And there's an awful lot of people that I've got to say who are neurodiverse who will kind of go and they take a diagnosis and sort of see it as being an excuse for the traumas that they've been through and how they can continue to act about it. And so I think there's a bit of taking ownership that sort of varies between different people. And certainly I've sort of recognized that actually there's nothing wrong with me, but it doesn't mean that I need to expect the world to adapt to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and that's, for anybody listening, that will be so uplifting, and it's such a positive way, Richard, to look at things, to look at it like that. It really, really is. And I think, for me, I can resonate with that, because I do a lot of that. I do, try to adapt to other people's, way of working and, other people's worlds. And I think it's, just being, confident, that, you've got your diagnosis, that is what it is. It's not going to, change you. You have to look at it in a, in a really positive light. And you have to think then, how can, it's about investing in you and start to be really confident with other people and try to understand how can you work with other people. What do you need in order to be more confident to adapt to others? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And, when you're part of a team, you have to adapt to be a part of the team rather than just expect the team to adapt all to yourself. So it's finding that right way and that right common ground that you can all operate in. And that's something that's core to everything that I've done in the technology world for the 30 odd years that I was very, very heavily consulting as a professional services person, where you're being dumped into random environments, not knowing anybody there, not knowing anything that's going on, having to understand all of the technology, having to sort of like then negotiate the politics, which isn't what I'd say something that I relished in, as well as being able to obviously to deliver the role that you were actually brought in for.
I think the other thing that I see a lot of, though, Richard, I think there is, I would agree that there is somewhere, people think, kind of, they take this diagnosis and think, kind of the world revolves around me sort of thing. Yeah. But I think the other thing as well is, I think it's, one, people digest it in a certain amount of time. Sometimes it hits people hard that they do think, whoa, I am so different. And, they feel bad for the diagnosis, and it does cut people up, because people do think, actually, I am different than the rest. And how do I now go out and feel confident that, how do I feel confident in taking that mask off? So I think there is some realization in that. But I think also, for me, what I see a lot of, obviously owning a technology recruitment company, see a lot of it. But what I do think, there is a bit of is people that have been diagnosed, or they're about to get diagnosed, or people that, have signs and they're undiagnosed and on the verge of getting diagnosed, waiting an appointment, whatever. I think if they're in an organization, it's for the organization as well to make them feel confident to come forward, because you can't just expect, like, I am, kind of quite naturally quite a confident person. And I think when it's your own business, I'm so passionate about technology and people. So, I am doing this because I want to turn my struggles into strengths. And because owning a technology recruitment company and heavily, people led within this space, what I wanted to do is to do this so that, to make other people come forward about their story within the neurodiverse industry, because I am in the world of neurodiversity. I am in the world of technology, dealing with people, and there is a lot within this space. So I wanted to be, as I feel that I'm at that confident point now with my diagnosis, I wanted to do something, that was uplifting for other people and some candidates that I may, represent, and get people to, come forward. But I think not everybody is like that, Richard. And I think it's for organizations, to create, whether a dedicated team,
supportive environment.
Yeah, a supportive environment, whether that's one-to-ones, whether that's, kind of coaching, knowledge days, bring external people in to make the neurodiverse talent, within that business, make them feel that, this is a confident space for you to come forward and to ask us for, a certain, adjustment, or, how do I work with the team to get the best out of me, sort of thing, but some people require the environment, the employer, they look up to the employer and the environment to come forward. And that's what I,
from my experience. No, I get that. That's great. From my experience, when you're sort of like parachuted in, they're not ready for somebody who's neurodiverse necessarily. But I've always known a lot of what my strengths have been, not because I've sort of not because I've necessarily worked on them, but just naturally sort of, a whole load of different strengths. And I've also been very aware of some of my weaknesses as a direct consequence, which I now recognize are neurodiverse traits, both for the advantages and the disadvantages. And I try to emphasize to anybody the advantages that I can help to provide with them. and that makes a huge difference. And so recognizing what, or trying to eliminate how my disadvantages have any play in the day-to-day existence is something that I really have always worked hard to do, so that they've not needed to necessarily adapt, but it was always something that I've always been very aware of. So, for example, when I was working, I'm still working with a social enterprise called Aurora. The company basically manufacture medical alert bracelets. Yep. So these are one that we prepared earlier, which were which I invented sort of like 10 years ago almost, after my best friend died. And so as a result, we started manufacturing these bracelets. And so working with Aurora, what we were very much focused on doing was on sort of trying to play to people's strengths. And where it comes, because it's a web app that basically powers and runs all of these things, one of the things that was really key was making sure we had good quality testing. And if you take a regular non-neurodiverse individual and put them into a testing environment, they can work their way through it. But if you put in somebody who is neurodiverse, the right type of neurodiverse, they can actually do routine things regularly, quickly, spot errors, can say, well, if I do this one test, that in essence will be running these 12 other tests. And they can spot how they can take shortcuts of one activity to sort of get to prove that actually lots of other things will work fine, which means that you can do your testing in a quarter of the time extremely accurately and extremely effectively, compared to someone else who doesn't necessarily see how all of the pieces all connect. And so playing to strengths, one of the things that we did was we actually started recruiting or looking for people who were actually autistic. This is long before I realized that I was, who were autistic, because I could recognize that strength. And it's a great advantage that actually means they are, as a generalization, they are way more valuable in the right environment than any other human could possibly be. And it's recognizing that and playing to that means that you can build some amazing teams where people are actually appreciated for their skills and capabilities and natural abilities, rather than feeling that their disadvantages, because there's always those, that the disadvantages kind of get in the way or actually compromise your value.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, you've got to be, you're confident. You've got to know your weaknesses. You've got to know your strengths. You've got to know your areas for further development, and things like that. Of course you have. But what I'm saying here, Richard, is that some people, might not be as confident as you and I. I've set up a podcast, on it, initiate that myself, thought of it from the design to, things like that. Some people aren't as confident. They might know it, but in order to, kind of voice that, they still look up to, an employer. I mean, I know a speaker, somebody that was on my show previously. And this is, remarkable. It brings hairs on my arm a little bit. Because he's a fantastic entrepreneur. A shout out to Ollie Newton that was on my show before. And he was Sky. He was at Sky. And, there was somebody, a manager, took him in as a, kind of one-to-one session and said, tell me about your story. And, that was somebody in the organization that was, very obviously neurodiverse friendly, wanted to be very inclusive, that human one-to-one interaction, pour me your story. It was neurodiverse friendly. And then he said, do you know what? Because you've got that confidence has come through, you've give your story, why not, stand up and do a speaking, something internally that they were doing. He did that. And now, he is, an amazing speaker, works everywhere, does lots and lots of speaking within, mental health space for, university, it's amazing. His journey is amazing, and that's what I'm saying. If organizations helped these neurodiverse people to come forward, give them that space, give them that opportunity, give them that confidence, then and again, let's do a knowledge day. Bring all of your neurodiverse teams in and do a few tests, see how they work, see what is capable.
Absolutely.
Just things like that. I'm a massive advocate for. Huge. So I'll go through some a couple of quick questions, Richard, because I'm conscious of your time. But I've got 4 or 5 questions, so I'll just go through those and just answer them, lightly and as effective as you can. So the next question that I had for you, I had this for you 15 minutes ago, but because we're having such a great conversation, it kind of fell behind a little bit, so I'm sorry about that. But can you remember the moment you first realized you saw life and tech a little bit differently to those around you? Can you remember the moment?
Yeah, well, I was 7 years old. My parents had a computing business, and they used to teach, when I say computing business, they used to teach things like Word and Excel, or at the time it was Word Perfect and something else. And that's what they did to sort of like people aged 16 to 18, that sort of age group. And they used to bring home sometimes the actual broken computers to actually see if they could sort of like sort them out. They weren't technical. They weren't very hands-on with hardware, but they thought they'd sort of see if they could tidy up these computers, see if they could find the problem with them. Anyway, they saw me, basically. I'd taken these computers apart like they were made of Lego, put them back together again, and they went, "Oh, is that?" And they went and tried it, and it was working fine. And they're kind of going, "Oh, that's all right, that's working fine." And then next thing you know, they'd try one out and it wasn't working. They'd give it to me. I'd take it apart, put it back together again, and it was working fine. And they sort of like suddenly went, "Oh, what's going on here?" And I just saw it as a natural thing. A natural sort of extension of, well, actually, it's just pretty obvious. You just put that in there, and that takes care of the visual sensors in the video card. That takes care of the audio sensors with an audio card. That takes care of the memory, which is the RAM. That takes care of storage, which is long-term memory, which is the hard drive. And each of the sort of almost like a mirror of our natural senses was mirrored within the actual computer build itself. Right. And so I went, well, that's pretty obvious. That just makes perfect sense. And then when I was, so that's one of the first times that I sort of realized that I saw it differently to everybody else, because it just seemed blatantly obvious. And then when you looked at any sort of computer programs, for example, I'd actually start trying to run through and go, "Oh, I see what it's doing. I see why it's doing what it's doing." I've never been a coder, but I have written some small programs over the years and shell scripts and things. And I sort of looked at it, I was like, "Well, that makes perfect sense." When I show it to somebody else, and they're going to go, "How do you even understand that?" And it's like, well, it's obvious. It's just this. And I even trying to explain it to them, they were going, "Don't get what you're saying." So I'm thinking, like, am I a robot or something? What is it that I can actually see this and work my way through this? And so I realized that I was very, very different. And then because I'd understood that, as many times in my life when that sort of skills have come in really, really handy, like when I was working with Bamfords and basically sort of ran their servers, or then when I was at university, because I actually went on to do a degree in marine biology after that, so a degree in fish, crabs and seaweed, back to the animals again. So it's always animals or computers.
Very busy, Richard.
There's a very good pattern there. But when I was actually at university, the lecturer at university, the IT, which is a compulsory module, the guy there went, "Actually, you know far more about this than I do. Do you want to teach the module?" And I went, "Yeah, right." Wow. And I taught the module at university. I've got to say, I did myself no favors with what I'm going to say to you next. And you're probably going to look at you and kind of go, "Are you off your chomp or what?" Yep. When it came to marking everybody's work, right? Yeah. I gave everybody the marks that they deserved, but I thought I can't really give myself top marks. That'd be really, really egotistic and selfish. So I gave myself a C. Right? I gave myself middle of the road. Yep, for my marks. I was giving everybody else's like A's and B's or whatever it is that they actually deserve. But I thought, well, I can't really mark myself high. I gave myself a C. And then it turned out that actually was a swaying score on, on my actual final grade at university. So how is that for stuffing myself up by actually teaching the module and ranking myself low? So that proves one thing, and that is never undervalue yourself.
Yeah. Wow. That is such a journey, and I can definitely see, how you saw life and tech a little bit different to those around you. It's such an inspirational one, that is, Richard. Really, really is.
Yeah. Thank you.
Such a privilege to watch. So thank you for sharing that. Really, really good. And the next one, which is what we're all talking about and is changing so many lives, especially neurodiversity, is what first sparked your interest in AI?
Okay, well, I've always, as I said, been very heavily involved in the technology space.
Yeah.
After university, I worked at Sick Children's Hospital to do some admin because I was in the national diving team, was in high and springboard diving, had an accident, couldn't actually continue that because I don't do things by halves, as you, Gareth, and others will have a bit of a sense on. And I basically, after my accident, I actually then went to work at Sick Children's Hospital. Somebody came in to repair their computers and I went, well, I can do that. Wrote to the guy's boss. They offered me a job. I started there 2 weeks later. And then they got taken over by a company called CSC, Computer Sciences Corporation, which is a really, really large IT service provider in the States and across the globe. And they basically then went, well, we're going to pay you not very much, but we'll train you up in stuff. We'll get you certified for this, that's, and so certified for all of the OS2 stuff, Microsoft stuff, the Novell stuff. Then sort of like they went, oh, you're quite good at sort of like, you're quite structured and methodical. And they went, do you want to become a project manager? So I was trained up with sort of like, in project management, so like Prince2 and all the rest of it. Then Six Sigma and all of the sort of business analysis training. And because they wanted to sell me out at thousands a day. Yeah. And it was like, well, they weren't going to increase what I was earning, but they did that. But I've always taken a great interest in every aspect of technology, and anything I could ever study, I would do. I was also, as a kid, I was also brought up in the world of science fiction. Yeah, as in watching science fiction, not taking anything. So I've always had an interest in science fiction. And when you look at a different technology, you go, well, actually, that really sort of aligns with the direction that different science fiction things sort of were going into. And you can sort of see how different things can connect and how people can have different ideas. And so pulling it all together, I've always had an interest in AI because of the science fiction side of things, but also known that we were a million miles from AI. And still, we're still about 500,000 miles from proper AI today. Because what we've got today is not AI, is not artificial intelligence, there's no actual intelligence. What we've really got is artificial interpretation. It takes data, like a giant version of Google. It takes data, sorts it, analyzes it, extracts it, and then presents it in a lot prettier, nicer formats than Google ever did. And so I've always had an interest in it, but I also know that we're just far from actual proper AI.
Amazing. God, there's nothing that you haven't done, Richard. Your journey,
there's plenty.
Mesmerizing. It really is. So I think the next, I've only got 3 other questions for you. So the next one that I'm going to ask you is, from your perspective, how can AI support the neurodiverse community?
Great question. I believe that, as we sort of talked about that whole sort of like drunken person, sober person conversation, I think quite a lot gets lost in translation. And I think that AI tools, where the bolt-ons to this sort of AI engine, if you like, they've got the ability to help with that translation capability. To take something and add more details, or take something and shrink more details. The ability to summarize quickly or to emphasize quickly, to be able to interrogate, to ask questions, to capture those questions, and actually then build up your own little knowledge base as well, is something that AI is really, really, really good for. Which means that then if somebody wants to understand something, they can actually ask it in their natural language rather than being hit by that sober, drunk barrier that I sort of like, I think makes a great analogy that we actually come across elsewhere with that sort of communication with neurodiverse people. So it acts as a beautiful ambassador for both sides in making sure you've actually got that communication happening properly.
Excellent.
That's really good. And the final question then, actually there might be 2, so just brief on these.
I'm so sorry, Lauren. I've got to disappear very shortly. We're running very long, so okay. If you could just ask one last question, that would really help.
That's fine, no worries. have you any advice for other tech pioneers who feel held back by neurodiversity, Richard?
I would say if they feel that they're being held back by neurodiversity, they haven't found their superpowers.
Yeah.
It's a word that commonly people use within the autistic sector is that about superpowers. And it's true. There are so many great advantages to being neurodiverse. That doesn't mean that it's like, it's a them and us situation. I do not mean that in the slightest. But what I do mean is that with those advantages, you can do so much more. And if we play to those strengths, we've already talked about how great it is to play to our strengths. And then to recognize other people who've got some ways and help them to fill in gaps. And so if we've got great advantages and other people actually need that, then we've got a real need. And if we're needed, then we should also be respected at the same time. And with that, we can actually take our brains and make really, really good use for them. And the people who aren't neurodiverse can use their brains to help to fill in the things that we're not as good at. So together, it's a really, really great partnership.
It really is about appreciating what everyone is good at doing and how they can fit together to form, frankly, I'm going to sound very hippie here, to form a better future where we work hand in hand.
Absolutely.
Amazing. It's been awesome to have you on the show, Richard. Thank you.
I've been watching in the sidelines as the engineer, and really amazed. Fantastic work, both of you. In fact, a great conversation. And to all of you watching, please do take note of the QR code bottom right. Remember, Lauren is in fact the founder of Key Global Recruitment. If you want that kind of understanding, that kind of support within a community, which I don't know what percentage it is, Richard, but a large percentage of the IT community is on the spectrum anyway. If you want someone who really understands it, really gets it, then Lauren's probably the best place to go. And thank you so much. Richard and I have been friends for quite a while, and part of the reason we get on so well, both on the spectrum, and we kind of just innately get it. And of course, Lauren's there as well, and it's been brilliant today. To all of you watching, please try and keep your feet on the ground, but do keep reaching for the stars. Who knows, you might catch the moon. And what I would say is look after that mental health. Until next week, goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
We're here to build your dream team. Building futures, that's our theme. Key Tech Talks will